What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Aggie Nation Podcast. I'm Alex Miller with the Eagle, joined by Travis Brown. Thanks to Colin Deaver for hopping on, talking a little Tyron Smith, football, El Paso, all great things, the 915. Hey, Travis, let's talk some basketball. A&M men's hoops, they got a huge road win last night over Auburn, and Tyrese Radford ordered the 30-piece nugget for dinner.
You were really proud of that tweet last night.
I really was. And I was not proud of ESPN for how bad their streaming lag was.
That was so frustrating. So I covered the games remotely, and I usually have the TV on and turn the TV on mute, and then have Andrew Monaco and John Thornton on the radio to listen to what they have to say, usually a little bit more insightful on the A&M side of things. And the Andrew Monaco and John Thornton's feed was about 10 minutes ahead of the ESPN stream. And if I'm not wrong, did you watch to the end of the game?
Yeah.
So I think it went from there was the 6-minute media timeout, and it went to commercial, and then it came back at 2 minutes.
It was just time warp. Okay, we have this fixed now, and we don't know why.
Yeah, so that was weird. It happened because it was supposed to be on ESPN2. It started on ESPN News, and then they moved it over, and in the moving it over, I think it jumped it back 10 minutes. So, I don't know.
Maybe it's okay that you got to listen to Andrew, or maybe it's not. I don't know. You'll have to tell him next time you see him.
Yeah, it's always great.
It's always great to listen to Andrew. Andrew's great.
It just was because it was 8 o'clock game, so we of course have a 10:30 to an 11 o'clock deadline, and so I'm trying to watch some of the game to be able to have some color to the story, but also listen and be ahead because I had to have the story mostly written by the time it was over. It was a little chaotic over at the Brown household.
I'm sure it was.
And this guy over here is texting me all through it, like I have nothing to do. So anyway, yeah, that's the woes of road games and being the beat reporter.
Well, not woes was the fact that A&M got a really pivotal quad one win for themselves. A&M now, they have 2 quad one wins, and Travis, in about 5 weeks from now, we might be looking back and saying, hey, that win over Auburn, that was a resume booster for A&M, whether or not that helps them, maybe get into the field of 68 or maybe helps them move up the seed line potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as A&M takes care of business against Vanderbilt this Saturday, which that is I believe a quad 3 game. So it's, it's one that they should, quad 3 game. It's one that they need to and should win. I think you're looking at next Monday. They're going to be ranked in the top 25. You would have to imagine. You look at some of the analytical sites. A&M moved up into the 36th spot on KenPom. Bart Torvik, who does the same kind of thing, they are 29. Let's see, I haven't looked at KPI yet today, but that's a little bit more results-based, so it's going to be a little bit closer to the net. Do you have the net rankings pulled up?
Yeah, I do. A&M moved up. It was into the 40s. They were at 43, up 9 spots from yesterday. So, certainly making some ground. I mean, when you look at the net rankings, 43 I think that's pretty solidly you should be in the field of 64 or 8.
It's right on the bubble, which is, I know Lenardi came out with his newest today, and A&M is in one of is number 2 first 4 out. That when you look at a guy like Lenardi, it's kind of the common denominator between the net, which is very much results based, and KenPom, Bart Torvik, those guys who are very analytics based. They don't take less into account whether they win and lost, and more account of what their stats look like on the court and how well they're playing against what an average team would be in the country. So Lenardi kind of combines those two. The analytics has A&M ranked a little bit higher because of the way that how well they're playing statistically, but they still had that Wofford loss and the Murray State loss to really kind of weigh them down as far as the results one. It's going to be in the middle. I think Bart Torvik right now has them on the 9 line.
Yeah, I think that's what you said earlier.
Cast. And so, maybe if you want to find the happy medium there between the two, one of the first 4 in, one of the playing games or 11-10 line might be kind of close to reality right now.
Yeah, and then we're starting to get into the thick of SEC play here. You look at the rest of the schedule. A&M's got probably their toughest games at home for the most part, and the ones that are deemed easier more so on the road, with maybe the asterisk of Vanderbilt being at home this Saturday. And it seems like Saturday's game is a game that A&M cannot afford to stub their toe and lose.
No, you have to win the quad 3, quad 2 games. Those are the games that A&M, especially now where they are in the picture of conference standings and the net and any of these other, they have to win those games because they are they are the games that A&M is expected to win, especially like Vanderbilt at home. You're expected to win that game at home. They drop that really puts the pedal to the metal on what they need to do to be able to get in. But if they play like they played against Auburn, they should be able to beat just about anyone left on their schedule, save for Tennessee and Alabama. That's a whole nother story, and you'll have to see kind of where they're trending at that point. But they have the ability to beat anybody else on the schedule if they play as well as they played last night.
We talked at length about Tyrese Radford's story with his academic advisor. Great story last week. We talked at length about that. But, I mean, we joke about him dropping a 30-piece on Auburn last night, but he is really starting to, become the guy, per se, it seems, for A&M.
Sure. Just in the last 5 games, if you want to look at traditional box score, he's in the 94th percentile of players in the country. This is according to College Basketball Analytics. In points per game with the 16. Field goal percentage is in the 65th percentile. He's averaging 3 points a game. The last 5 games, you can see a whole bunch of these stats in the 90th percentiles. He is one of the best players in the country. And I believe it was Tom Hart or one of the ESPN commentators last night tweeted out, Tyrese Radford needs to be in consideration for SEC Player of the Year, just with what he's been able to do and how he's kind of come out of nowhere a little bit. Not nowhere, I think people who follow the program, but it's from a national standpoint with what he's been able to do. His defensive rebound, he's rebounding 14.8% defensive rebounding. He's the only person on the team higher who's a guard is Dexter Dennis. Rebounding that. He's just an all-around good player, and the kind of all-around he is an all-around better player than Quentin Jackson was last year. Quentin Jackson had the flash, he had the speed, and he had the flashy play, he had the flash. Tyrese Radford is a more complete player than Quentin Jackson was last year, and A&M is better off for it.
Yeah, it seems like his savviness is really starting to show. He's really grown his game in that aspect. It was definitely a good sign for A&M to see Julius Marble back out there after he had to leave the game against Kentucky with what looked like a head injury.
Yeah, him and Dexter Dennis ran into each other going for the same rebound. He took an elbow to the head, it looked like. He was back out there and looking great. Did a really good job down low. I think the thing that has been interesting, A&M was one of the best in the country at not taking fouls. They had very low foul numbers going in. In the last couple of games, opposing teams have been able to game plan to get some of A&M's guys in a little bit of foul trouble. I know Wade Taylor, Henry Coleman, and Dexter Dennis, I believe, all finished with 4 last night.
Yep.
And they were having to manage Wade Taylor late in the game because that's not something early in the season, really early in the season. That was actually a big problem. And it not only was taking fouls, but taking fouls way away from the paint was a problem. Then they got really, really good at it. And it's kind of creeped back in a little bit, and not to a necessarily super concerning degree, but it's something that I think that's something that teams have game planned to kind of figured out about the Aggies is they can get some of these guys into foul trouble. I mean, think about with what Tyrese Radford was able to do last night, putting up those 30 points. If you had four more minutes of him in the first half of that Kentucky game where he was out because he got 2 fouls early, how much of a margin does he give A&M in that game? I think that's going to be something to watch moving forward, because also Buzz Williams has whittled down his rotation to a very tight, really 7-man rotation that's dependent upon some of these guys to produce. And then on top of that, not only right now you don't have Solomon Washington, who's going to give you great defensive and great rebounding minutes, and Manny Obaseki, who at times can give you as many as about 10 points on average and is going to get you a couple rebounds too, and be that kind of second-tier offensive point guard. They're missing those two guys in the production that they have. So on top of that, you lose any of those guys to foul trouble, and that's where the numbers start having some problems if you want to look at kind of balancing the equation for success.
You mentioned A&M's injury update. Solomon Washington, of course, he's still in concussion protocol, suffered a couple weeks ago. He should probably be getting close to maybe getting back on the court, you'd think.
It sounded like it was a pretty good concussion. I rewatched the play that it happened on, and it was a gutsy effort laying out to tip a loose ball over to Wade Taylor, who ended up getting fouled. But, he absolutely did a face plant into the wood when he did it, and his head bounced off the wood face first. And so as of Tuesday, Buzz Williams said he hadn't even been going to class because of the light sensitivity and the headaches. And so you got to get the guy back into class, and then moving forward, we'll be and here's the thing. I'm not saying Vanderbilt gave Arkansas a run for the money, or actually beat Arkansas earlier this year. It's certainly no team in the SEC this year is one that you can absolutely just brush aside, save maybe South Carolina. But then again, South Carolina beat Kentucky before A&M walloped them out in South Carolina. So I'm not saying go ahead and rest the guy, but I think with Vanderbilt coming in, it probably wouldn't be necessarily a game you need to rush Solomon Washington back into, especially with the stretch they're going to have late in the season.
Sure.
But good, it will be a lot better. The equation will balance itself better with having him back in the lineup.
And Obaseki should be back, early February maybe?
Yeah, it was 4 to 6 weeks after the Florida game.
That was on January 4th.
Right. So we're looking at a month. So sometime maybe mid-February is probably the more quick route.
Yeah.
Maybe by the end of February, that could be a chance. Just depends on probably once you get the healing done, it gets into pain tolerance and how that goes.
Well, he'd be a big boost for A&M with what he's able to provide. But it's a game that A&M should win on Saturday, Travis. But it's definitely a game they cannot afford to lose at all.
No, Vanderbilt isn't going to blow you away with really any of their stats. Their top usage guy, Liam Robbins, he's at 28% of the possessions. It's pretty high. It's right at the top of the high tier. Jordan Wright is a 6'6" guy. The Liam Roberts is another 7-footer, but they face that in Castleton, and Castleton is probably going to be a much better player. They aren't necessarily a great rebounding team. They're in the 60s in rebounding percentages. They're 56 in adjusted offensive efficiency in the country, so not bad, but 167th defensively. If A&M puts up the kind of offensive effort and the efficiency of the offensive effort they had against Auburn, they should be able to run away with it just by the offense that they play. They're not a great three-point shooting team, but teams shoot a decent. Well, they don't shoot a decent percentage against them. They turn the ball over a decent amount. So the stats certainly aren't in Vanderbilt's favor, but they have a good coach in Jerry Stackhouse, and like I said, were able to beat Arkansas earlier this year and beat Georgia. Georgia beat South Carolina for their 3 wins. So the first game of the season was against Memphis too, and it was a 9-point game, which was just about as close as within 10 in a college basketball game is close, and that's what A&M did with them as well. So shouldn't be one that they should scoff at, but one that they should probably roll away with pretty easily.
Some food for thought. This is going to be one of only 2 conference games being played on Saturday because Saturday is the SEC Big 12 Challenge. What's interesting, I know they do this all in advance, and it's based on how standings were the year or 2 years before, but I was kind of surprised when they announced the slate for this year and that A&M wasn't included, given that they kind of finished middle of the pack last year and were a team that you would think was on the rise. You think about having to play a game like Vanderbilt, where A&M's playing pretty well right now. They could have really benefited from, maybe matching up against a team like Baylor or TCU and maybe trying to get another quad 1 non-conference win to balance out some of those losses.
I'm going to disagree. I actually think with how their schedule is set up, with the fact that they're still going to get 6 or 7 quad 1 wins by the end of the season, or quad 1 games by the end of the season, I think it probably has a chance to do more harm than hurt. Just adding another loss. I mean, they're a bubble team right now. They're already a 5-loss team.
That's
You're not
fair.
going to see many 5-loss teams, get higher up in the seeding that might have capped them out at where they can get higher up. So they can't take any more losses because they're already. If you're a betting man, you're probably going to say that they're not going to beat Alabama and Tennessee, 2 of the better teams or at least Tennessee is going to be a really close one, and Alabama is probably going to run away with the conference title. So if you're considering that those 2 are losses, that's 7 losses this season, and they're going to have a really good resume, which is going to help them. But I think this is a year that they don't need to be playing that game and have a chance to take another loss. But it is interesting that they've been out of it 2 years in a row, especially with the ties. If you want to look at it as it's definitely a made-for-TV event, with the ties that A&M had formerly being in the Big 12 and the schools you could play now if they played like a Texas Tech right now, that would probably be pretty good for them. But you would think that the draw is there for a lot of the teams that they could possibly play in that tournament or in that
showcase kind of
thing. But from a basketball, from a NCAA tournament standpoint, they're going to get the resume they need with the games that they have on their schedule. I think it's probably a good thing for them that they're not having to worry about that extra game in there.
Fair enough. Well, anything else before we get going, Travis?
I think that's good. I'm glad you mentioned the SEC Big 12 showdown there because that is a little bit of a talking point. It is just, I think it's exciting and a good thing. I like watching it as a fan. I think from a team standpoint, it is probably it probably feels a little bit like the end of season football game, the UMass kind of football game. Granted, it's a lot better competition, but it doesn't seem like necessarily, especially with how good the Big 12 is, there's a lot of quad 1 wins to be had there in that conference. There's a lot of quad 1 games to be had in the SEC. Those teams in those conferences probably aren't going to need those kind of resume boosters, and so it probably feels a little bit like a lose-lose for a lot of teams in those to play that game.
Sure. Well, I think that's all we got for this week's episode. So thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check all of our coverage of A&M athletics and A&M men's basketball and A&M football signing day next week.
Signing day next week.
We'll
definitely
be back.
Chat about that next week.
Absolutely. Well, happy Australia Day for all who celebrate, and we'll see you next week.